In my 30 years of watching people, I've learned that the greater the power, the more dangerous the abuse. Our silence grants others that dangerous power. Edmund Burke. Chapter 1. The invisible chains. Invisible chains. They tell you to be calm, to swallow your rage. A lie. Unexpressed anger is a self-imposed prison. Its chains forged by your own hand. They tell you to be calm, to swallow your rage, to let it go. This is a lie. Understood what Machiavelli understood, what most still refuse to see. That unexpressed anger is not control. It is a self-imposed prison, a weapon aimed at your own back. Right now, you might be carrying invisible chains forged from the resentment you never voice, the slights you never address, the boundaries you let others violate. These unvoiced frustrations don't disappear. They settle. They accumulate. Like a slow poison, they drain your energy, cloud your judgment, and make you astonishingly predictable to those who observe you closely. You become a psychological open book, your every avoidance, every silent retreat, broadcasting your vulnerabilities to anyone paying attention. Think about the subtle shifts in your body language. When you are offended but choose silence, your jaw tightens, your eyes narrow, your shoulders hunch, or you just go quiet. This isn't invisible, it's a flashing signpost. People see it. They don't just see the anger, they see your unwillingness to act on it. They learn your tolerance levels. They learn your limits, not by your words, but by your repeated non-actions. This is why passive anger makes you an easy target. It tells predators you can be pushed. It signals that you will absorb the blow rather than deliver one back. Your silence becomes an invitation for more disrespect, more encroachment. Because there are no consequences, you teach them exactly what they can get away with. Watch what happens when you consistently defer, when you avoid necessary confrontations. You might believe you are maintaining peace, but you are actually sacrificing respect. The space around you shrinks. People take liberties. Your quietude is perceived not as strength, but as a lack of resolve, a willingness to be walked over. The insidious trap is that you start to resent yourself for this inaction, compounding the initial anger. This internal conflict saps your drive. It makes you hesitant, less decisive. Every time you hold back a necessary challenge, you chip away at your own internal authority, slowly eroding your confidence to assert yourself when it truly matters. Here's how this silent poison works. You develop a pattern, a habit of swallowing the bitter pill. This habit then becomes your reputation. People around you internalize it. They come to expect your passivity. They anticipate your withdrawal. There's nothing for them to fear, nothing for them to respect, because you've shown them you will always default to silence. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, understood the profound danger of internal turmoil left unchecked, even for a man of immense power. He knew that the mind, when filled with unaddressed resentment, becomes a battleground, not a fortress. What he understood is that true control isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about acknowledging it and directing it with purpose. This isn't about explosive rage. That is another form of self-sabotage. It's about the strategic handling of legitimate anger. If you announce your anger without a plan, without a firm boundary, people will simply dismiss it as emotional noise. But if you quietly process it, understand its source, and use it to inform your strategy, then your actions become your voice, and there's nothing for them to dismiss. The invisible chains of passive anger bind you, but they also offer a perverse comfort. They allow you to avoid the temporary discomfort of confrontation. They promise a false peace. But this peace is fragile. It's built on a foundation of surrender, and sooner or later, that foundation crumbles. The world doesn't care about your good intentions or your unspoken grievances. It responds to action. It responds to action. It responds to clear boundaries. When you refuse to set those boundaries, When you refuse to defend your space, you effectively invite others to define it for you, often to your detriment. This is a cold, hard truth. You are not doing anyone a favor, especially not yourself, by allowing anger to fester beneath the surface. It leaks out in subtle, indirect ways. It manifests as cynicism, as passive aggression, as a general resentment towards the world. These are not weapons. They are just more ways you bleed your power. To dismantle these invisible chains, you must first recognize their existence. You must understand that your reluctance to address conflict openly is not a virtue. It is a tactical weakness. It is a signal that you are not prepared to defend your territory. The quiet suffering you endure doesn't make you noble. It makes you exploitable. It makes you a predictable element in the game others are playing, a known quantity they can factor into their plans. They know you won't retaliate. They know you won't push back. This knowledge is currency in their hands. So, the first step is to accept that your unexpressed anger is a liability, not a shield. It's a signal flare that screams, vulnerable, to anyone paying attention. It's not about becoming aggressive, but about becoming assertive, about taking ownership of your emotional landscape. But merely recognizing this liability isn't enough. There's another subtle, more pervasive trap that most people fall into, one that promises control but delivers only stagnation. What is it? Chapter 2, Your Predictable Fuse. A predictable fuse, a fatal flaw. Your suppressed anger, like a tell in a high-stakes game, betrays your hand. Understand these vulnerabilities, or your enemies surely will. That trap is your predictable fuse, the subtle patterns your unexpressed anger carves into your behavior. They call these tells in the poker world unconscious signals that reveal your hand to an observant opponent. Your suppressed frustration doesn't vanish, it simply reroutes, manifesting as predictable sighs, sudden silences, forced smiles, or a quick change of subject. These aren't acts of control. They are signposts pointing directly to your emotional vulnerabilities. This predictable fuse destroys you because it gives your adversaries an instruction manual to your mind. They don't need to guess your limits. You show them exactly where they are and how you react when those limits are crossed. Every time you flinch in a specific way, you're providing data, training them on how to trigger you for their own benefit. It's a silent conversation you're having with the world, and everyone is listening. Watch what happens when a skilled manipulator senses your quiet annoyance. They won't confront it directly. Instead, they'll press a small boundary, observe your tell, perhaps a slight tightening around your eyes, a subtle shift in your posture, or a clipped tone, then back off. They're not being kind. They are calibrating their weapon, learning your precise pain threshold, and your habitual response. They're testing the elasticity of your boundaries, not out of malice, but pure strategic calculation. This is why your predictable fuse is more dangerous than an explosive one. An overt outburst might scare people away, but your subtle tells invite them closer, empowering them to chip away at your resolve with surgical precision. They learn exactly what subtle pressure produces a predictable withdrawal, a reluctant concession, or a quiet resentment that festers. It makes you an open book in a game where everyone else is playing with hidden cards. Here's how you eliminate this vulnerability. You must first identify your own tells. Go back and replay those moments where you felt that quiet resentment, that passive aggression, and observe your own physical and verbal reactions. Did you suddenly become overly agreeable? Did you shut down conversation? Did you dismiss your own feelings with a quick joke? These are not isolated incidents. They are components of your predictable fuse. What Sigmund Freud understood is that the unconscious mind has its own language, revealing itself through slips, dreams, and behaviors we don't even realize we're exhibiting. He saw that repressed emotions don't disappear. They manifest in other ways, often as patterns that become deeply ingrained. Your tells are precisely this, the unconscious expression of anger you refuse to acknowledge or confront directly. Once identified, you must disrupt these patterns deliberately, even if it feels unnatural. If your tell is to always concede with a sigh, force yourself to hold the line, or simply state no without apology. If your tell is to deflect with humor, try answering with directness and seriousness. The goal isn't necessarily to become aggressive, but to become unpredictable, to break the circuit between their provocation and your ingrained reaction. If you announce your anger, people can react to the anger itself. But if you quietly display your tells, they have nothing to push back against, only a predictable weakness to exploit. Your enemy is not your anger. It's the predictability of your anger's passive expression. Break that predictability, and you break their map to your vulnerabilities. Sun Tzu, the ancient strategist, taught that if you know yourself and know your enemy, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. What he understood is that self-knowledge is the ultimate defense. Knowing your own tells, your own predictable fuse, is knowing a crucial part of yourself. It allows you to become an unraidable opponent, someone whose reactions cannot be charted, whose next move remains a mystery. This disruption isn't about becoming a different person. It's about reclaiming your emotional autonomy. It's about not allowing your subconscious to dictate your responses, especially when those responses only serve to make you an easier mark. Stop giving them the script for your reactions. Stop giving them the precise coordinates for your internal triggers. When you consistently deny them the expected reaction, their entire strategy begins to crumble. They lose their leverage because the predictable outcome they relied on no longer exists. They are left guessing, poking blindly, rather than confidently pushing the buttons you so helpfully installed for them. The journey to true control isn't about suppressing your emotions, but about mastering their expression. It's about turning your internal landscape into a fortress, not a billboard. Only then can you move from being a target to becoming a player who cannot be read, cannot be anticipated, and therefore cannot be easily manipulated. But there's another layer to this strategic thinking, one that involves understanding the very nature of conflict itself, one that ensures your power isn't just about defending, but about shaping the game before it even begins. What is it? Chapter 3, The Silent Sabotage. Silent sabotage, a quiet poison, your unacknowledged fury, a weakness others exploit. Witness how your own passive anger dismantles you, piece by insidious piece. It is the quiet rot within, the silent sabotage that blossoms from your own passive anger. This isn't the rage that explodes. It's the resentment that settles deep, poisoning your decisions and making you an open book to anyone who bothers to read the subtle signs. They don't need to attack you directly when you are already dismantling yourself from the inside out, piece by insidious piece. This unacknowledged fury manifests in 1,000 small failures. You miss deadlines not because you're busy, but because a part of you refuses to engage with the system. You forget appointments, not from a lack of memory, but from a subconscious rebellion against the demands placed upon you. Every delayed email, every chronic lateness, every opportunity you accidentally let slip through your fingers is a monument to the anger you refuse to confront, making your actions predictable and your weaknesses transparent. Think about the individual who constantly complains about their circumstances but rejects every solution offered to them. They secretly crave the validation of their suffering, refusing to step out of their self-made cage because their anger gives them a twisted sense of purpose. This internal division, this civil war within your own mind, drains your will and prevents true strategic action. It makes you a willing, unconscious participant in your own downfall. Here's how others weaponize this. They don't fight your anger. They simply provide the rope you use to hang yourself. They set up scenarios where your passive resistance will naturally emerge, knowing you will choose self-sabotage over direct confrontation. Your unspoken frustrations become the blueprint for their moves because they can predict exactly how you will subtly undermine yourself, giving them an advantage without lifting a finger. Carl Jung understood that what you refuse to acknowledge within yourself does not disappear. It merely retreats into the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to express itself, often in destructive ways. He stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What he understood is that your unaddressed inner conflicts become the hidden architects of your external reality, shaping your failures and defining your limitations. If you continue to deny this internal enemy, pretending that all is well, your covert resistance will only grow stronger, silently eroding your foundation. You will find yourself unable to commit fully to any plan, always holding back a part of yourself, always ready to find an excuse for failure. This makes you an unreliable asset, a weak link, easily discarded, because your own self-doubt does half the enemy's work for them. But if you quietly observe these patterns within yourself, acknowledging the roots of your passive anger without judgment, there is nothing for them to exploit. You identify the triggers, you understand the underlying resentments, and you disarm your own internal bombs before they can explode. This is not about lashing out. It is about self-awareness, about bringing light to the dark corners of your own mind where true power is often hidden. Napoleon Bonaparte, a master strategist who understood the critical importance of a cohesive force, once declared, "An army marches on its stomach." He knew that internal divisions, whether physical hunger or psychological discord, could shatter an otherwise formidable force. What he implicitly understood about an army is equally true for the individual. A mind divided by unacknowledged resentments cannot execute a coherent, winning strategy. Your internal state dictates your external strength. Those who master their own inner landscape become immune to this silent sabotage. They realize that true power comes from internal alignment, from having all parts of themselves working towards a single goal. They don't waste energy fighting themselves. Instead, they direct all their force outwards, where it can actually make a difference. This makes them formidable. Contrast this with those who externalize their hidden rage, blaming every setback on external forces, never looking inward. They project their own internal chaos onto the world, becoming victims of their own unaddressed emotions. This makes them predictable, easily manipulated by anyone clever enough to exploit their need to blame others. They are easily led astray, always seeking an enemy in the world to match the enemy within. The strategic player, however, knows that the first battlefield is always within. They observe their own tendencies, their moments of resistance, their quiet resentments, not to judge them, but to understand their source and redirect their energy. This self-mastery is not a weakness. It is the ultimate strength, because it closes off the most subtle avenues of attack, making you impervious to the silent sabotage that claims so many others. This internal discipline, this unblinking gaze at your own imperfections, is how you fortify yourself against hidden attacks. But there is yet another subtle pressure, a different kind of weapon used by those who seek to control you. It doesn't come from within, but from the insidious use of your own beliefs against you. What is it? Chapter 4, The Empathy Trap. Empathy, a dangerous game. It's not the compassion you offer, but the understanding you crave that truly exposes your vulnerabilities, and mark my words, they will be exploited. This pressure is called the empathy trap. It's born from your own passive anger, the resentment you carry that hasn't found an outlet, leading you to an unspoken demand for understanding. You project your unaddressed pain, expecting others to see it, to validate it, to offer the solace you refuse to give yourself. This silent cry for recognition is not a sign of strength. It is a glaring weakness, a beacon that draws in predators. Think about it. Every time you hint at your struggles, every sigh you let out that is meant to be overheard, every subtle gesture that broadcasts your inner turmoil, you are actually demanding an emotional payout. You want others to do the heavy lifting of processing your feelings for you. This need for external validation, this unspoken plea for someone else to recognize your suffering, makes you transparent and utterly predictable. It means you are giving away your power. Watch what happens when you operate this way. You'll find yourself surrounded by those who offer the appearance of understanding but never genuine support. They listen, they nod, they offer empty platitudes that feel good in the moment. These are not allies. These are scavengers. They see your demand for empathy not as a plea for connection, but as an open invitation to exploit your emotional state. Here's how they use it against you. They don't actually care about your pain. They care about the access your vulnerability grants them. They feed you just enough sympathy to keep you talking, to keep you exposed. The more you explain your hurts, the more details you offer, the more they gather about your soft spots, your insecurities, your triggers. They build a dossier on your emotional weaknesses, all while you believe you are building a connection. This is why you must never broadcast your hurts. If you announce your pain, people will either mock it, ignore it, or worse, use it. They will see you as a project to be managed, a pawn to be moved, or simply a drain on their own energy. But if you quietly process your own struggles, if you address your passive anger internally without demanding external validation, there's nothing for them to latch onto. You present an unbreachable front. Your need for others to understand your anger, your sorrow, your frustration is a wound you refuse to heal yourself. You hand the scalpel to someone else, expecting them to stitch you up, when all they intend to do is widen the cut. The moment you require another person's emotional investment to feel whole, you have given them the reins to your emotional well-being, and they will drive you wherever suits their agenda. What Socrates understood is that true wisdom begins with knowing yourself. He wrote about the imperative of self-examination, of understanding your own motives and your own character. If you do not delve into the sources of your own passive anger, if you do not face the difficult truths about why you harbor resentment, you will forever project that unexamined pain onto the world, seeking external answers for internal questions. And Winston Churchill, a man who understood the brutal realities of power, once remarked that success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. What he understood is that displaying weakness, complaining, or seeking pity is a strategic error. It invites exploitation and demonstrates a lack of resilience. True strength lies in enduring your own struggles without demanding the world stop to comfort you. The empathy trap is not about being cruel. It's about being effective. It's about recognizing that seeking understanding for your unaddressed emotional baggage is a weakness that will be exploited. You must learn to carry your own weight, to face your own shadows, and to understand your own pain without making it a public spectacle. But beyond the internal battle against your own projected needs, there are those who actively construct these traps, setting them with deliberate intent. They don't just wait for you to stumble, they bait you. What are these calculated attacks? Designed to shatter your resolve and break your spirit. Chapter 5. The unspoken demand. The silent trap, your deadliest enemy. You demand, yet never speak. This invisible ledger, marked by others' failures, fuels a slow, burning poison within. The first trap they set for your passive anger is the unspoken demand. This is not about your overt requests, but the silent expectations you hold for others, the phantom requirements you believe they should intuitively understand and fulfill. You walk through life with an invisible checklist, marking down every perceived failure, every missed cue, every instance where someone didn't anticipate your needs or read your mood. This silent burden you carry becomes a wellspring of constant, low-level resentment. You never articulate what you want, what you need, or what bothers you. Instead, you expect others to simply know, to mind-read your emotional state and respond accordingly. When they inevitably fail at this impossible task, your passive anger slowly, imperceptibly solidifies into a bitter contempt for their supposed ignorance or indifference. Watch what happens when this dynamic plays out in a group. You might quietly resent a colleague for not offering to help with a task, even though you never asked for assistance. You stew in your frustration, your body language growing colder, your responses shorter. You tell yourself they should have known, they should have seen your struggle, they should have offered. Your unspoken demand creates a vacuum, a space where clarity should be, but isn't. People around you sense your shift. They feel the disapproval radiating from you, but they lack the specific data points to understand its origin. They become confused, defensive, or simply wary, unsure how to navigate your unarticulated grievances. This confusion is not just inconvenient, it's an open invitation for a manipulator. An astute adversary sees this dynamic and immediately recognizes its utility. They observe your silent disapproval, the way you withdraw or subtly punish others for failing your invisible tests. They don't need to understand your true complaint. They only need to understand that you have one and that you refuse to voice it. This is how they begin to sow discord. They will step into that vacuum you created, offering their own manufactured interpretations of your behavior to others. "She seems upset with you," they might whisper. "I think she expected you to do X, even though she wouldn't say it directly." They don't need to be right. They only need to be right. They only need to plant the seed of suspicion to give form to the formless resentment you project. This is why, if you let your anger simmer unspoken, you become a puppet to anyone willing to interpret your silence. They don't just exploit your existing frustration, they shape it, directing its vague energy toward targets of their choosing. Your passive anger, once a silent personal struggle, transforms into a weapon wielded against you by proxies. Here's how you shut down this exploitation. You speak your truth. You articulate your needs, your boundaries, your expectations clearly and directly. This isn't about being aggressive, it's about being precise. You replace vague emotional signals with concrete statements. If you announce to the world that you are hurt or disappointed, you give them power over your emotional state. But if you quietly and firmly state a boundary or clearly express a need, there's nothing for them to interpret, nothing for them to twist. You own the narrative because you were the one who spoke it into existence. As Confucius once taught, if names be not correct, language is not in accordance with the truth of things. If language is not in accordance with the truth of things, affairs cannot be carried on to success. What Confucius understood is that precision in language is not a mere courtesy. It is the foundation of order and effective action. When you fail to correctly name your demands, when you let them remain unspoken, you invite disorder. Your silence, therefore, isn't strength. It's a gift to your enemies. They will fill your unspoken demands with their own malicious interpretations, poisoning your relationships and isolating you from potential allies. They thrive on the ambiguity you create, turning your emotional vagueness into concrete accusations against you. Consider the wisdom of Aristotle, who argued that the ultimate value of life depends upon awareness and the power of contemplation rather than upon mere survival. What Aristotle understood is that clarity of thought and self-awareness are paramount. When you allow passive anger to manifest as unspoken demands, you forfeit awareness. You operate on instinct and resentment rather than conscious thought. They want you to remain unaware, to feel but not to articulate, to seethe but not to state. This condition makes you manageable, predictable, and ultimately controllable. Your uncommunicated expectations become the invisible chains that bind you, not to others, but to the very anger you refuse to release through clear expression. Your responsibility is to define your own reality, to name your own terms. Do not allow your emotional landscape to be mapped out and exploited by those who would rather see you isolated and powerless. Your voice is a tool. Learn to use it with surgical precision, not emotional guesswork. But what happens when they move beyond mere interpretation and actively create an environment that forces your silence, that makes speaking up seem like a suicidal move? What are the mechanisms they employ to make you feel like your only option is to suffer in quiet desperation? Chapter 6: The Burnout Strategy. The burnout strategy? A subtle weapon, often self-inflicted. Understand how your own unspoken angers become the enemy's silent ally, draining your power. They don't need to force your silence. They just need to exhaust your will to speak. This is the slow bleed, the insidious attack on your very capacity for sustained action. This is the burnout strategy, a quiet war waged not with open conflict, but with 1,000 tiny cuts designed to drain your energy reserves until you have nothing left to fight with. Your passive anger, the resentment you hold on to, the frustrations you never address directly. These are not dormant, they are active, corrosive agents inside you. They demand constant attention, a low-level internal conflict that siphons off your mental power, your emotional resilience, and your physical stamina without you ever realizing the true cost. You become a vehicle running on fumes, while your enemies simply observe your predictable decline. This chronic internal struggle prevents you from deploying your resources effectively. Every time you replay a perceived slight, every time you fantasize about a confrontation you never execute, you are burning fuel. You are expending precious cognitive bandwidth that could be used for planning, for strategizing, for building your own future. Instead, you're locked in a shadow boxing match with ghosts. Think about the person who carries a grudge like a heavy backpack, day in and day out. They might function, they might even smile, but beneath the surface, a constant drain is operating. Their decisions become sluggish, their focus fractures easily. They react more than they initiate, always responding to the last grievance instead of anticipating the next opportunity. Your adversaries understand this mechanic perfectly. They don't need to defeat you in a direct contest if they can simply make you too tired to compete. They will create environments of ambiguity, situations where minor slights accumulate, where boundaries are subtly pushed, knowing that your passive anger will do their work for them. They wait for you to exhaust yourself with internal conflict, leaving you slow, predictable, and an easy target. The trap is that you believe you are protecting yourself by not engaging, by holding your peace. But this silence is not strategic. It is self-destructive. It turns your grievances inward, where they fester and consume you from the inside out. You're not saving energy. You're converting it into a toxic sludge that clogs your mental machinery. What you are doing is engaging in a battle with yourself, a battle that only benefits those who wish to see you weakened. They provide the spark, then step back, allowing your internal fire to rage uncontrolled. They measure your slow reaction times, your dwindling initiative, your increasing willingness to settle for less, and they know their strategy is working. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, understood the destructive power of unchecked emotion when he wrote, "Anger, if not restrained, is a short madness." What he understood is that this madness, even when held passively, corrodes your capacity for rational thought and decisive action. It turns your internal landscape into a chaotic battleground, leaving no room for the clear, cold logic needed for strategic victory. Here's how to disarm the burnout strategy. You must recognize that passive anger is an active drain, not a passive state. It demands closure, not prolonged internal debate. You must identify the sources of this slow bleed and decide with surgical precision whether to eliminate them, confront them directly, or detach from them completely. There is no middle ground where you can silently simmer without cost. If you continue to stew in private, replaying old wrongs, you are only feeding the internal fire. Your energy continues to bleed, unnoticed by others, but devastating to yourself. Your enemies, meanwhile, continue to conserve their own energy, watching you squander yours in pointless internal combat. They thrive on your self-imposed exhaustion. Instead, when you feel the first stirrings of passive anger, you must immediately categorize it. Is this something you can change? Is it something you can walk away from? Or is it something you must confront, not with emotion, but with cold, calculated strategy? This immediate assessment stops the internal bleeding before it becomes a hemorrhage. Albert Einstein, recognizing the fundamental laws of the universe, once stated, "Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. What he understood is that the energy you pour into passive anger doesn't vanish. It is transformed into stress, into fatigue, into a diminished capacity to act. The trick is to transform that energy into directed, outward action, or simply to deny it the fuel it needs to burn. The dark strategy here is not to suppress your anger, but to refuse to let it become a self-sustaining drain. Stop feeding it with rumination. Reclaim that energy. Channel it into building your defenses, into sharpening your skills, into executing your own plans. Make your internal landscape a fortress, not a leaky bucket. When you refuse to engage in the internal war of passive anger, you conserve your most precious resource, your operational energy. You become less predictable, less susceptible to the subtle provocations designed to wear you down. You restore your capacity for sustained, strategic effort, transforming from a slow, easy target into an unpredictable force. But what about the truly insidious forces? The ones that don't just drain you of energy, but actively manipulate your perception of reality itself. What happens when they aim to cloud your judgment, distort your vision, and make you doubt your own sanity? Chapter 7. The Shadow Play. Self-inflicted ruin. The mind, a battlefield where your own passive anger becomes the deadliest foe. Prepare. There is a deeper, more insidious current, one that doesn't just wear you down, but actively turns your own mind against you. This is the shadow play, where your unaddressed passive anger becomes a weapon, not in the hands of an enemy, but in your own. It warps your sight, distorts reality, and makes you an easy target for phantom threats. This isn't about external manipulation anymore. This is about self-sabotage, a slow bleed of focus and energy. You become your own most effective adversary, creating conflict where none truly exists, diverting your resources from the actual game. When you swallow a slight, when you avoid confronting a minor disrespect, that anger doesn't vanish, it doesn't dissipate, it sinks into the unseen layers of your mind, festering, building pressure. It needs an outlet, a target, and if you deny it the truth, it will invent one. This internal pressure forces your mind to project that unresolved resentment onto the world around you. You begin to interpret neutral gestures, innocent remarks, even simple silence as coded attacks. The world becomes a stage for your internal drama, populated by villains of your own making. This is why it destroys you. You start seeing enemies everywhere. Every colleague is scheming, every friend is disloyal, every stranger is judging. Your precious attention, your strategic focus is consumed by fighting ghosts. You waste immense energy on these imagined battles, depleting your capacity for real, impactful action. Watch what happens when you're nursing a quiet resentment toward a teammate who got credit for your shared work. Instead of addressing it, you let it simmer. Now, every casual comment they make, every suggestion they offer, even their friendly demeanor, is filtered through that lens of unacknowledged anger. You invent intentions, you see slights, you build a case against them in your head. You begin to interpret their entirely neutral actions as direct assaults on your standing, their ambition as a personal threat. You construct an elaborate, false narrative of betrayal and competition, all fueled by your own internal, unaddressed rage. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this internal warfare. He spoke of resentment, the bitter indignation that arises from a sense of powerlessness, which often leads people to blame external forces instead of taking responsibility for their own condition. What he understood is that this self-deception, this projection of weakness onto others, drains you of genuine power and blinds you to your own capacity for strength. Here's how you shut down this shadow play. The first step is brutal, unflinching self-honesty. You must confront the sources of your passive anger directly, inside yourself. This is not about externalizing blame, it's about internalizing accountability. Identify the slights you swallowed, the boundaries you let others cross without a word. Pinpoint the moments you felt disrespected, undervalued, or ignored, and acknowledge the anger that came with them. Name these feelings, accept their existence within you. This does not mean unleashing that rage outwardly, causing chaos. It means processing it internally, understanding its true origin and direction. You detach the raw emotion from the distorted projection. You recognize the feeling without letting it define the reality you perceive. Once acknowledged and understood, that passive anger loses its power to warp your perception. You gain the ability to objectively assess situations, distinguishing genuine threats from the imagined ones, separating real challenges from the shadows of your own mind. The fool, consumed by their shadows, attacks allies, alienates neutral parties, and blinds themselves to true dangers. They are a self-made wrecking ball, constantly colliding with their own projections, wasting their energy on battles that exist only in their head. They become easy prey for anyone with actual ill intent. But the strategist, having cleared their internal fog, sees with pristine clarity. They conserve their aggression for actual adversaries, for battles that truly matter. Their energy is focused, their vision sharp, their moves precise. They don't fight ghosts, they fight reality. Leonardo da Vinci urged us to learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else. What he understood is that genuine insight comes from detached observation, from a mind free of internal clutter and bias, not from one clouded by unacknowledged emotion that distorts the true connections between things. This clarity of vision is an unparalleled weapon. It allows you to move with precision, to strike at the root of a problem, not at its phantom reflection. You stop reacting to fabricated threats and start responding to actual opportunities. You cease to be a puppet of your own unaddressed emotions. You become the puppeteer, master of your inner landscape, ready to face the world not as it appears through your anger, but as it truly is. Chapter 8. The Doctrine of Clarity. Passive anger, the enemy within. We shall dissect this insidious foe, its methods, and how to harness its destructive potential for your own strategic advantage. The struggle is internal, always. Your battlefield is not just outside, but within the walls of your own mind. Passive anger is the fog of war that blinds you to your true enemies and your true allies. It masquerades as control, but it is the ultimate loss of control, a slow poison seeping into every decision. This hidden fire burns through your reserves, leaving you hollowed out, reactive, and weak. You remember the silence, the cold shoulders, the subtle sabotage. You recall the endless internal debates, the scenarios replayed, the justice you felt you were owed but never pursued. This is the behavior of the targeted, not the hunter. This is the mark of someone who has given away their power to an emotion they refuse to name. Your passive anger creates a visible weakness, a hairline fracture others instinctively exploit. They sense the unexpressed rage, the unaddressed resentment, the simmering frustration. It makes you predictable. It tells them where your tripwires are, how to provoke a delayed, disproportionate response, or how to simply wait for you to self-destruct. Every missed confrontation, every unspoken truth, every swallowed slight creates a debt. This debt accumulates inside you, warping your perspective, twisting your relationships. It prevents genuine connection because you are always guarding against a perceived attack, always holding back a part of yourself. You build walls not for protection, but for punishment. You might believe you are maintaining peace, avoiding conflict. This is a cruel deception. What you are actually doing is nurturing a festering wound, allowing it to grow in the dark. True peace comes from resolution, from understanding and addressing the source of the agitation, not from burying it alive. Miyamoto Musashi, the Sword Saint, understood that true victory comes from understanding your opponent as well as yourself. He taught that if you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything. What he understood is that your internal chaos, your unexamined anger, is an opponent far more dangerous than any external foe. It must be seen clearly, its movements studied, its weaknesses exploited. You must confront this internal adversary with the same discipline and focus you would a real threat. Stop running from it, stop making excuses for it. Look at your passive anger directly, without flinching. Understand its triggers, its patterns, the subtle ways it manifests in your life. This is not about rage. It is about precision. It is about cold, objective analysis. Map out the incidents that feed it. Identify the people who consistently provoke it. Recognize the situations that amplify it. You are charting the terrain of your own inner battlefield. When you observe your anger without judgment, when you dissect it like a surgeon, it loses its power over you. It transforms from a controlling force into raw data. This data becomes intelligence. It informs your strategy. It sharpens your decisions. Your energy, once scattered and wasted on simmering resentment, can now be channeled. It becomes intent. It becomes focus. You direct it towards what serves you, towards what builds your future, towards what creates your desired reality. Abraham Lincoln, during the crucible of a nation divided, understood the profound importance of character and internal consistency. He once said, "Character is like a tree and reputation like a shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing." He knew that true strength came from the deep roots of self-knowledge and integrity, not from outward appearance or unaddressed internal rot. Your unexamined anger is a disease to the tree of your character. When you master your passive anger, you become unpredictable to those who once counted on your weakness. They expect a slow burn, a delayed reaction. Instead, they face a calm, decisive force. You gain an edge that few possess, complete control of your emotional landscape. You will operate not from a place of suppressed emotion, but from a place of deliberate choice. Your responses will be measured, your actions will be surgical. You will no longer be a victim of your own internal weather, but its architect. If you choose to ignore this, to continue letting passive anger run its course, you will remain trapped. You will continue to be a target, to have your energy drained, to make suboptimal decisions. Your potential will remain unrealized, choked by the vines of your own unaddressed resentment. The ultimate weapon is not a sword or a strategy, but a mind free from distortion. It is a mind that sees things as they are, stripped of the filters of resentment, jealousy, or unexpressed rage. This clarity is your shield and your blade. Your command now is simple, stark, and absolute. Look within, unearth the buried rage, dissect it with cold precision, understand its every facet. Then harness it. Do not suppress it. Do not release it blindly. Channel it into your will, into your ambition, into the relentless pursuit of your objectives. Make your passive anger a servant, not a master. Let it fuel your silent ascent, not your visible downfall. From this moment, let your actions be the only echo of your resolved fury. This is the doctrine of clarity. This is your command.